Hey guys, welcome to my Samoan language instruction on unless, except, although, and others. There's no vocabulary words in this lesson, but we'll get to that next time. I thought I'd give you a break. The first thing that we're going to be talking about today is the concept unless. And the way that I say that in Samoan is se'i longa. And basically what you need to know is that you use this word the same you would in English. And I think that's in all cases, but I'm sure I'd find someone that would be like, oh, it's used in this different way, and we don't do that in English. Every way that I can think of that you use se'i longa is the same way that you would use it in English, okay? So, just so you know, se'i longa introduces independent clauses, and it usually comes in the latter part of the sentence. Here's some example sentences. I would encourage you to look over them, and if you're having a hard time, then I'll translate them really quick. But if you're not, then you can move on until you see me go to the next slide. So I'm not going to the doctor. Hopefully you can translate this, but if you are having a hard time, we'll do this together. So ote lei, this is I'm not. This is the equivalent of I'm not. This is I. This is my tense marker te that I use in descriptive formats. And then lei is the thing that negates whatever verb that's going to come next. And so I would say alu because that's the singular version of go. And then my prepositional phrase is to the doctor. And I will write this correctly, unlike the document above. So that's the first part of the sentence. The second part of the sentence is unless we go together. And so again, you just use that unless the same way that you would in English. You put it where you would, the same. So I would say se'i longa, that comes next. Almost acts like a preposition. And then I would say we go together, the same. So I'm implying two people going. You could say tato, but then I'm going to use my tense marker, then my go plural, and then fa'atasi. So that's the first sentence. If you're having a hard time even doing the sentence with my explanation, as quick as it was, you do need to probably go back to the sentence structure videos and brush up on those. The next sentence is going to be I refuse to go to the meeting unless we get some good food. So this part of there's one part of this sentence that you might be having a little bit of trouble with, and it's because I haven't taught it to you. So I refuse to go to the meeting. It's not in this part, but it's in the second part of the sentence. So again, I, present tense, refuse. This might be a word that you know, it might not be. Hopefully after this video you'll remember that, and I need it better you. Alu, and that's because I'm going. And then again, I'm going to use that same prepositional phrase to the meeting. In this case. Okay, moving on to the second part of the sentence is unless we get some good food, and the we is going to be implied. That's why I have it in the parentheses. So again, I would just say se'i longa the way that I would in English, and then I'm not going to put the we because I'm implying it. If you wanted to put the we in, you obviously could put that in, and that would sound something like tato te or tate. Whichever you are saying. But again, we can imply the we and then just say a maua. And then this right here, this is what I was talking about a little bit before, is say you normally have seen it as a singular and non-specific usage, almost like the word and we'll get to this in a later part of the course, but just know that this is a way that you distinguish in an amount of things besides just singular amounts of things. So this is that sentence. I hope that you were able to do that. And let's move on to the next part of our sentence, or our video. So except, again, this is about the same way that you would do it in English. So the way that I say except or except for in Samoan is vangana. Vangana. And you just make sure you put the appropriate emphasis on the specific A's that I've indicated with the macrons. And then sometimes it's followed by an I. And One other thing that you need to know is vangana can also mean unless. So just like we talked in the last slide, where unless is se'ilonga, you can also hear unless being said as vangana. And don't ask me why they do this. Obviously, se'ilonga, the one on this page, is the one that I heard more often used for unless. But you'll also hear vangana used as unless in a fair amount, I want to say. So those are the things that you need to remember. And so these, I'm not going to go over these. You should be able to translate these on your own. But I would encourage you to go through both the English and the Samoan and make sure that you are understanding how I translated it. So again, you just use it the same way you would in English, except for you can say vangana for unless as well. Okay, moving on. When I use se'ilonga or vangana, in most cases, when I need a tense marker, I use one of these two, the a or the te, depending on if I'm using descriptive or emphatic, and then the ua is also used a lot. And again, these right here, I'm going to have you go over all of these. So I would encourage you to translate these two specifically up top, and then after you do that, then I would do the practice sentences. Okay, so again, try those practice sentences, and then here are those answers. So again, I would encourage you to translate whenever you can, and then compare with what I put. And then the hardest part of this video is although. Although is expressed in the word or the particle ui. And this can mean although, though, or even though. And I imagine there's additional usages that could be used. I just can't think of any yet. But these are probably the top 3 most used versions of ui. And I'm sure there's other etc. ones that are, pretty much the same meaning as these 3 things that you can use for ui. For some reason, when I think this word, I always think like French, but maybe that's just my funny mind. Sorry for that. But when you use we, it's usually preceded or followed by the tense marker a. And you can also do a we lava at the end of the we for emphasis. And in most cases, but not all cases, and I'm showing you an exception to this rule that I'm about to explain. But in most cases, when I have the article we and then the particle ina, and by the way, this should be in red. I'm sorry I didn't put that in red. And also the lava should be in red too. I'm sorry I didn't put that in red. But the ina, if it follows the we, it normally means that an independent clause is coming. Okay, so that means that the we ina is coming before an independent clause, something that can stand by itself. But that's not always the case, and I'm showing you the very last example on the slide, how they still use the ina even though sometimes it doesn't have an independent clause coming right after it. So let's just go over these real quick. So even though the movie was good, so we need to address this even though. And that's a we ina. So I'm throwing in the ina even at the very beginning of this sentence. And that's great. You don't have to, but it just implies that an independent phrase, in most cases, I would say probably 95% of the time, that an independent clause is coming right after it. Meaning that I'm having a tense marker right here, and then my predicate, lele, is acting as the predicate in this case, and then the subject. And so that in itself is the sentence structures that you learned earlier in the course. So a we ina, even though the movie was good, so the thing that's acting as the predicate in this in this sentence is good. So a lele, and then the movie is the thing that was acting as the subject. So that would be le tifanga. And you might ask why, so we have a was, a we ina sa lele. Why don't you have a sa right there? And again, you could definitely put the sa lele or the na lele, and it would be grammatically correct. I'm just telling you that in a lot of cases they just put the a right there, regardless. And again, if you really want to emphasize it was in the past tense, you could say the sa or the na. In this case, it would probably be the na, which would be the more appropriate one. But again, you'll see this a more often. I would presume. That's just my opinion, but that definitely could be wrong. So then the next thing is I didn't go to it yet, so you should be able to say the second part of that sentence right here on your own. I ote le'i alo ei. And this last part, if you're having a hard time with that, again, I'm telling you this I at the this I concept, it's a little bit tricky, so we're saving that to probably the end of the course to really distinguish what that means. So, but just know that you use it at the end of the sentence to kind of bring back things that you talked about earlier. So moving on, we have I will still love you. You should be able to translate that one on your own. That's olea alofa pea yate oi. And if you wanted to, you could switch that up a little bit, but that's that's a good translation. And then we have even though, so that's a we, and I'm going to say a lava ina, just adding emphasis. And then the ina, again, it normally tells me that a independent clause is coming, which means a tense marker, either a subject or a verb, depending on which format I'm using. I'm going to America, which would be olea in the future. Olea, the future tense marker, and then I am the person doing the going, so olea o, and then going or traveling. A lot of times they'll use travel a lot more than I feel like we use in English, but that could be a wrong statement. And then to America. So hopefully you're understanding this. If not, again, I would encourage to rewind and go over those again. So we talked about this in the last two examples. Ewi lava ina is used in the past and future tenses. So again, if I wanted to, in this sentence, I could say ewi ina sa or na. I could definitely do that, or I could say ewi ina olea, like this part right here. You could definitely do that. But another thing that you need to take note is that sometimes when I'm doing it in the present tense, I don't need a tense marker. And this isn't in all cases. I could definitely throw in an a, like you saw here. But it's not always going to be the case. You don't always need to throw in an a right after the ina if it's in the present tense. If it's in one of the other tenses, you definitely need to throw in that other tense. So, although my family likes the girl, so this is what we're talking about. Although, and this is a we ina. So again, I'm throwing the ina in there to imply that an independent clause is coming next. And then the thing that comes next is likes, because that's acting as the predicate. And then my family is the subject, so that's lo'o'ainga. And then the girl is the object, leitene. So that's that sentence. And then moving on, I don't want to marry her. You could just say o te le fia fai poipo. So I don't want to marry her, just the same way that you would in English. Okay, moving on to the next example. Keep doing your homework, and you should be able to say that. So that's fai pea lo mea a onga. And then even though it's hard, and this is the exception that I was talking about earlier, that you'll see even though it's a we ina. And the rule that I told you, the ina, this thing that's following it, it's hard, is not necessarily an independent clause. You could say it on its own, but it's hard is kind of just something that I don't think of as an independent clause. Maybe that's wrong thinking, but here's my explanation. So, wi ina whangata, it's hard, you just say whangata. So hopefully those sentences are making sense, and let's move on. So another usage of this awi, and then you could throw that on the lava, is despite. The difference is I have an awi and then an e at the end. So if I have an e that follows my awi, then it's almost like a negative although. So it's despite, in spite of. And then you'll see another usage of it. And in this case, I could say I or awi, one of the two, and then e leia. So if I throw in a leia with it, it means pretty much the same thing, but it's almost like nevertheless or in spite of that. So that's the difference between the two. If I say awi and then an e at the end, it's just going to be despite or in spite of. And if I throw in a leia at the end, then it's usually going to be nevertheless or in spite of that. And again, I'm sure there's other translations that you can throw in there. These are just the ones that come to mind, and probably the most often ones that are used. So in spite of, so this is the thing that we're talking about. So the in spite of here, and when we say in spite of, we also, again, we say the awi, but then we add on the e right here at the end. And that's exactly what we're doing right here. So awi, e, and then her illness, you just finish it off the way that you would in English. So lona ma'i. And then she still did, so let me just cancel that. So she did many things, and you should be able to say that in your normal sentence structures. Sorry. So sa, that's a past tense marker, and then ia is the doer, and then phaya. Again, you should be able to say this with your normal sentence structures. And then nevertheless, again, you do the same thing. When I start off a sentence, or whether it's in the middle, I can use either of these, I or a. And so when I say nevertheless, I tend to say I with it, but that's just a personal preference. I don't know if that has any validity attached to it. But the way that you would say nevertheless is I, we, e, leia. That whole thing right there. I, we, e, leia means nevertheless or in spite of that. And then I would just say the rest of this sentence like you would in your normal sentence structure. So ote le fia fia ila na fuafuanga. All right, so moving on to your practice sentences. So this video was a little bit shorter, but I hope that you can internalize the concepts in it and do these practice sentences. Again, I can't express you doing it on your own and how much better that'll be than if you just listen to me. But pause the video at this point and do these practice sentences. Okay, so the answers to those are here, and until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching and subscribing. It means a lot. But I'll see you next time. Tofa soifua.